Hey, it's John Reed, johnerp.com. We got a Google Hangout on enterprise mobility. Last time the three of us got together, we got ourselves in a hell of a lot of trouble. Do you guys remember that? Yep. We had to have a sit down. We had to have a sit down actually with some higher ups. So
we did.
Where are those people now?
We're still here and they're gone. How's that?
We carry
That's
on.
Probably not a good way to start this, but
yeah. So we're moving up in the world, huh? So on my right, perhaps your left, I've got the international man of mobile mystery, Kevin Benedict. What's going on, Kevin?
Hey, how you doing, John?
And then I've got John Appleby, now a U.S.-based rock star. What's going on, man?
I'm going to go for the obligatory bluefin plug. Here we go, bluefin plug with the bluefin mug.
Nice.
This thing saves my life and costs me a fortune. Saves me a fortune as well.
Yeah, I'd show off my bluefin tattoo, but it's...
Well, I'm just doing my Rubio impression.
So guys, what we're going to cover today for our viewers is we're going to talk just about enterprise mobility. Where is enterprise mobility in the middle of all this consumer hype? Where is there any innovation, if I can dare use that word? Is there really anything that's got traction? And then in the last part of our taping, we're going to hone in a little bit on SAP's mobility strategy and where that stands. So I want to go back in time just a little bit to Barcelona, where Kevin and I were at the Mobile World Congress event, which is a massive show, 70,000 people. So I guess you could call that a pretty big gut check on enterprise mobility, although I didn't see as much enterprise as I saw consumer. What did you see there, Kevin?
Yeah, most of the big players at the MEP level or the mobile application development platform level were not there. So that, I guess the news is the absence of news from a lot of those players. Many had been there in past years. They just chose not to go there this time. I did see a few of them there. I think really that the Mobile World Congress is a great place for doing partnerships and meeting clients, things like that. It's just, I do think that most of the mobile application platform companies struggle today. They really are still trying to figure out the business model. So a lot of them just saved their money and they were there. And a matter of fact, I met many of the platform people there, but they didn't have booths.
Well, what I was struck by was when I walked. I mean, it obviously was a huge campus, right? And walked by when you see a booth where the IBM booth is like 1/10 the size of a Samsung booth,
yeah,
it tells you something about like how enterprise mobile is stacking up right now, right? I'm not picking on IBM or anything because in and of itself, some of those booths were pretty impressive. It's just that it seemed to me like consumer tech was really driving what was happening there.
Yeah, although I really liked the SAP booth. It was 2 stories. It had stairs up both sides and a kind of a patio up top overlooking the whole scene.
And some pretty decent coffee. So Kevin, what were your takeaways from the event?
Yeah, let's just talk about SAP there for a minute. They had at least 2 or 3 locations where they were focused on M2M, so machine to machine, or the embedded wireless world, or the Internet of Things, however you want to describe it. They both in the connected village where they were showing off HANA connected in real time to sensors in Hamburg, Germany's cargo area and shipping area around their port, so they could park trucks. They knew where the trucks were parked, where there's empty spots, where the containers were, what was coming and going, and that was all being reported through M2M sensors straight into HANA, so they were getting real-time analytics sent out. So that's what they were showing in the connected village part of it. And then in SAP's booth themselves, of course, they were showing smart vending machines and telling all kinds of cool stories. But it really is, they were highlighting that. They had whole kiosks just focused on the M2M side. So that was kind of new. That was over the last year. Sanjay Poonen has really been emphasizing that. I was able to do a lot of interviews with the SAP mobility folks while I was there as well, and just asking them about the role of social as well. How does social play and social collaboration? What role does it play in enterprise mobility? and they were well versed on that, and they had some powerful answers about, enterprise mobility is all about enabling the remote and mobile workers. Well, and that requires collaboration at the same time. And they've announced, SAP Jam and all kinds of other collaboration platforms that they're really emphasizing now. And that all fits straight into enterprise mobility as well.
Kevin, I went to the show like really looking for basically stuff that kind of blew me away, right? Stuff that would really open my eyes to the potential of mobile, and especially in an enterprise context. And I was impressed by some of the machine-to-machine stuff I saw there. The other thing that impressed me a lot was some of the mobile banking stuff. We did a video with I think PGP was the name of the firm, but they have been doing a project in Uganda, rolling out mobile banking. And basically, in these areas of so-called developing countries, what's so interesting about mobile in those countries is that it's forcing companies to rethink their entire business process, because you can't just, we have a local bank branch, let's throw out a mobile app for these people. Well, there is no bank branch, right? and in a lot of cases, there isn't smartphones. And to me, what is so interesting about that is by throwing out all those premises, you're coming up with really unique, lightweight ways of communicating and conducting transactions. And after this guy got done presenting on Uganda, I said to him, when you're done, could you come to the US?
I know.
And so I think in some ways it's interesting where there isn't an established infrastructure. I'd be curious to see if you agree with me or not, is where sometimes the most interesting stuff is happening, because you're rethinking applications from scratch instead of just tacking on a browser or a simple self-service thing.
If we look at Africa in particular, somewhere around 60% of the population is unbanked, so they don't have current banks. So they're opening up massive new markets, because if you look at the 60% that are unbanked, almost all of those guys have a feature phone that supports text message. So there really is an incredible amount of stuff you can do through SMS. And, I almost look like, I look at it like SAP is almost rediscovering what they have in their toolbox. And I know you would probably get disagreement from the, what do they call it now? Mobilizer? If that's the product they're calling their SMS-based environment now. But, that kind of also goes back to SAP's kind of emerging strategy of putting all their stuff under one umbrella product suite. And when a company buys a license to, SAP's mobility solutions, they kind of get everything underneath the covers. And they can pick and choose what they need for any particular app. But that's included in there now, the ability to support SMS in all these very interesting environments.
All right, well, more fodder for the SAP segment. I want to dig into it a little bit. John, you weren't at the show. What would you be curious about as far as, what was learned there? Was there anything you were watching from afar? You're like, if I was there, here's what I'd want to know.
Well, I think the consumer trends in mobile seem to be very interesting this year. I mean, you've got Apple, who are they on the rise or on the decrease? Who knows? We've got really the explosion of Android and Samsung. Samsung's massive brand strength. Second thing, we've got what appears to be the death throes of RIM. A bit difficult to tell. Maybe that's too early to call, 1 quarter in, but. And we've got the potential rebirth of Nokia via Microsoft. I mean, that consumer/device piece is quite interesting, and it plays out quite clearly, I think. I mean, we'll know in a year's time what's happening. On the enterprise, I think it's a little bit more difficult, because I don't think SAP has made the depth of penetration it would have liked yet. It's a very difficult market, right? But yet a sort of a second player, a real winner in that market is also not emerging. So I'm wondering how many people are really implementing on the mobile side, where the opportunities are in the enterprise. It seems pretty clear where the opportunities are in the domestic and device arena.
Yeah. So Kevin, why do you think, when you said that enterprise mobility is struggling, what's the nature of that struggle?
Well, I think in the first wave, there's a lot of money that was put in and invested. And so everybody was doing these big marketing pushes. Everybody was going to Mobile World Congress in the last couple of years. But what they were, it was early. And so they have to educate the market, and they're not getting the return on investment on some of the huge marketing initiatives they have been. So they're kind of retrenching on the marketing side, saying, really, where's the market? Where's our opportunity to find this and discover this economy of scale? They need to be innovating so rapidly, but they're never making money on any particular version of their platform. They're not selling enough volume to make money on it. So they're continuing to do R&D, R&D, R&D. And I think in a lot of cases, they're still falling behind because this is such a wacko market in mobility that anybody can innovate, that what you have is at the grassroots level, especially in the consumer space, is far outpacing what is possible in the enterprise space. So if you look at where the big money was spent at Mobile World Congress this year, it was announced on the first Monday of Mobile World Congress a $200 million investment in AirWatch. They talked about they have basically a football size booth space there. It was massive. The biggest I've ever seen. Is like half the building seemed like it was AirWatch. And they called it the $200 million booth because they announced that investment the same time they roll out this booth. And they're targeting particularly enterprises. And this touches on another thing. I read an article this morning by Mark Andreessen with his venture capital firm and everything else, which says this year, 2013, is the year of the enterprise. So the last few years, it's been the consumerization of IT. It's been all the consumer apps, consumer app stores, all this stuff. But now all the VCs are wanting to put money into the enterprise side. So it goes back and forth. Every year it switches, is what the article said. This is the year of the enterprise. You see that where the big investments seem to be going around mobile device management, mobile app management, and security.
Yeah, I was looking at a Gartner webinar on mobility earlier today, and they were presenting CIO findings. And I guess for the year 2013, 2000 CIOs, mobile investments number 2 on the list. And, I was torn between two reactions. One was, yeah, that makes sense. And the other was like, yeah, that's bull. I don't know, John, you've been talking with a lot of customers. Bluefin, are you hearing this emphasis on mobile rollouts? Or
I think the problem is, we're where we were 4 years ago on this. The problem is it's hard.
Yeah.
And there isn't a panacea. Apps don't work in the enterprise. I don't think anybody has shown an app which is really reproducible. The best you can do is to template, and actually a lot of the times even the templates don't work, so you have to build from scratch, and that's because of the design of legacy ERPs. And you look at the cloud vendors; they don't have those woes. Salesforce, I think, has a pretty credible mobile app because their platform is simple and relatively less modified. Your average ERP customer's got thousands of modifications, which make the apps, well, first of all, the apps are relatively low value in their productivity, and second, the cost of implementing them is very high. So unless you've got a solid return, people they don't know how to do it. That's simple.
And I would second that, going back to my statement earlier, in that I don't see the opportunity for scaling or for the economy of scale that's going to drive these guys to profitability. They end up being half service industry. So they're providing the templates and some platforms and some tool sets, but it really is a service offering. They've got to go in there with a lot of consultants every time, and it just doesn't scale easily. I would second what you're saying there, Mr. Appleby.
Yeah, and this is what we see. I mean, where I'm sat right now is a place where this has happened, and I think the business case was as much desiring to satisfy the employee as it was an ROI. And if you're in that place and you want to make your employees happier people, because a mobile app will help that, then that's one thing. And it also depends how many employees you've got, because the cost of development is pretty similar in many cases for 1,000 employees compared to 100,000. So, you've really got to have some scale to make those enterprise apps work, and I think we're seeing that in adoption.
Yeah, John, I would just add to that too that mobility is just one of these disruptive technologies and innovations that is happening all at the same time. You know, I'm carrying the title nowadays of social mobile analytics and cloud analyst. Why? Because those four are hitting everybody all at once. Everything,
So
you know,
this
people
is
are all looking at social collaboration. How do you do that with mobile and analytics and cloud all at the same time? And so these could flip companies upside down. So this is a big thing. It's not a simple thing.
so I can accuse you of smack talk then.
You can,
Is what it goes.
and I'll accept that.
Yeah, yeah. I've been waiting for the SMAC moniker that you've been propagandizing to take off. So maybe it will.
Yeah.
Until then, enough of your smack talk. But no, you do have a point. I mean, there's just a lot of simultaneous issues that are challenging companies right now. Yeah, guys, I also want to throw out. I mean, maybe looking for the killer app is the wrong way to look at it in some ways, because there's so much last mile development that seems to be needed to really have an impact on particular industries. But when I evaluate mobile apps, and I've had a chance to do this quite a bit now with smaller shops who are building apps, the things I'm noticing are this: if they come from the ERP side, the apps often have really good back-end integration, and a lot of times they solve industry pain points because these folks have deep backgrounds. So those two things look good. A lot of times, though, they miss the opportunity to simplify and reimagine the business process. So if it took 20 screens on your desktop, it still takes 20 screens, or it takes way too much. So I see something lacking there. And then the biggest thing I see lacking is UI. As far as a really great user experience, it just seems to elude a lot of these pioneers and enterprise apps who are coming from the ERP side. And then I go to these shows like the Mobile World Congress, and I see these beautifully rendered apps. We did a video with a guy who his company built some apps that allowed you to do some geolocation tracking of Olympic sailboat competitions and stuff. And the apps were gorgeous, right? And yet those folks don't have any depth or understanding of industry pain points in the ERP world that mobile can help solve, right? They don't have that knowledge. So it seems to me there's a real gap issue between the folks who know how to build really kick-ass stuff on mobile and those who really know how to solve enterprise problems. I mean, am I off base?
Yeah, I mean, so what we do, John, is really simple. We grab those people from the front-end technologies. You've got an SAP developer here who knows process, and you've got an iPhone developer here. They're two different people. And by the way, they're different to the project manager. That's another person as well. So we tend to find that a mobile team, it needs 3 or 4 or 5 different personalities. And that developer for this device, that's a very different type of person.
Right. And do you get a result by doing that?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah, huge. I mean, the roles that I see are you need a management role. You often need an industry or an application specialist role. You need an integration / a back-end developer role. You need a front-end developer role, and then you need the secret bit of sauce, which is the user experience, or as SAP would love to call it, design thinking. But it's a UX person. You need all 5 of those. Sometimes you can get them in more than one of them in a person, but a lot of times to do a nice mobile app, you need 5 people.
I would add to that you might need a 6th, which is an engineer to actually make the vendor's platform work.
Yeah. I'm not going to respond to that. Yeah, but you're right that in every case you need roles from the vendor. You need people from the vendors to assist. But I don't think those are roles on a project. They're support roles for consulting.
And don't you need a social media person to be tweeting out the updates on what's happening every 5 minutes as well?
Well, yeah, you joke about that, but in a lot of companies they have things like innovation forums where people go and pimp their wares that they're developing. It's not unusual.
So that it's interesting. that becomes part of the so-called agile team as someone who's actually creating PR as you go along as well.
Yeah. Yeah, usually that's the manager though. That's their job, is to face out and
Right.
in.
I see. So that explains your behavior online.
My behavior online. I don't think anything explains my behavior online.
So guys, when we talk about enterprise mobility, there's so many different directions you can go in right now, from machine to machine to bring your own device to HTML5 versus apps. Is there anything that's standing out, or maybe something basic like security is more what's on? What do you think customers really care about?
So I would just like to touch on one of those real briefly here, John, the BYOD. I've been talking to a lot of companies lately, and nobody's truly using BYOD, right? So I think we like to throw that phrase out there, and it sounds good, but it's always a subset. Even, I was listening to an SAP webinar on BYOD and how they support that. BYOD is 10 devices within the SAP employee base. And, we almost need a different acronym for that says, yeah, we'll support a certain subset, but we've got to manage this because you can't open up to everything. It is Wild West out there, and nobody's been able to lasso that, make it under control, unless they define a certain subset of devices.
So I'm gonna argue on that one immediately.
Okay.
Just to be controversial, not that I would do that. So I can't tell you where I am right now, but I can tell you that here there is only BYOD, and the deployment, I think thus far, I have to check, is around 3,000. iPhone and Android, I believe. I have to double check, but the corporate devices are not supported yet. They may be later, but only BYOD.
So, but what does that mean there? Does that mean all Android devices and versions, or a subset?
Well, okay. So, I mean, I lost count of this, but I think there's well over 200 devices that you'd need to test to make it truly all Android. So, and again, we can double check the facts on the guys, but it's these things here, 4S and 5.
Okay.
And by the way, what it does is it's got a little bit of application software that installs a silo in your iPhone.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take over the device. So we have some control over the silo, but not over the device. I'm trying to remember the software that we use for device management. I've forgotten it. Otherwise, I'd give them a shout. But anyway, if I remember it, I'll say it. So you install a silo in the iPhone device, and in the Android device, it's limited to I think the 10 or the 15 most popular devices. But how many do you want to test?
Right. So I mean but I don't see where that differs from what I said. They identify a subset, and they support those and say no to all the rest.
That's what BYOD is, isn't it?
Well, I'm arguing that yes, BYOD is a subset. It's not bring your own device at your any kind of device, right?
Well, it's certainly not bring your own Nokia N90, no.
But I'm just saying, if you look at the mainstream media, they try to make it out like you're going to support everything anybody finds and brings in. It's just, I just want to correct that perception that I haven't seen that in reality.
So would you prefer that we change the acronym to BYODK, which would be bring your own device, kind of?
Yes, there you go.
All right. Okay, so from now on, it's BYODK.
Okay, I don't know, Kevin. I'm not with you on this one. I think, if you look at the sales of devices, it's a small number of very popular devices that people are bringing in.
Yeah.
That's my sense.
Yeah, because some people use BYOD to say the company doesn't purchase them. So now they support BYOD, but you have to bring one of these two devices. So it just, are we talking about really the ability to secure any device an employee wants to use, or are we talking that the employee buys the devices? That's all. I just slice it up a little bit thinner and say, what do you really mean by that?
Well, I suppose the real question is why do you want to do BYOD, right? And as far as I can tell, there's no downside for the company, right? But first of all, you're not paying the company for the device or supporting it, really. And in addition to that, you get extra buy-in from the employee because they're happy that they brought their device, and you get more work out of them. I mean, there are lots of reasons to do it, and lots of reasons to constrict the number of devices. I mean, I would even question now a strategy of supporting BlackBerry within the enterprise or BYOD. I mean, the market share is falling fast. But I don't know.
Yeah. But I think
another shout out to one of SAP's mobile partners. Thanks, John.
I got to remember the one that I ought to be pimping because it's nice software. But, oh well.
I don't know, John. I saw BlackBerry 10 at Mobile World Congress, and it looked pretty slick.
Yeah, but it wasn't at a BlackBerry booth.
Well, you make a point there.
They didn't have a booth. But here's what's interesting. Neither did Microsoft and neither did Google. None of those guys had booths there. They went through their partners. So, you'd see Android stuff in Samsung and HTC and all these others. And you'd see Microsoft stuff there too, but it wasn't their own booth.
By the way, Kevin, I think it's a little bit embarrassing when you have a mobile show and you can't solve basic Wi-Fi or mobile apps connectivity issues the way they had at the Mobile World Congress. Listen, I understand there's 70,000 people there, but it is a reminder that we talk about mobile as if all the technology is there, but there's still issues with bandwidth and connectivity and all that stuff that really impact our ability to get shit done on mobile.
Oh yeah, talk about productivity loss. I spend most of my time trying to find a good connection to upload YouTube interviews with mobility experts.
It's all you guys with your MiFis. It's the MiFis to blame.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a readiness factor is my only point. So guys, let me get back to this killer app discussion for a sec. Do you think that so-called killer apps could exist in the enterprise mobile space, or do you think there's always going to be an issue with the need for last mile customizations, which get complicated and imply, as Kevin was saying, a big services industry, or is it just that we haven't seen the really good apps yet?
I think if there was an app that killed you, that might not be popular.
Well, you know what I mean, like a semi-dangerous, semi-lethal.
It reminds me of the bunny in Monty Python. Anyway.
So I would suggest the killer apps that you're seeing are the likes of Dropbox and Box and YouTube and all these others that you can use for multiple purposes, both enterprise and consumer. So, I mean, there are killer apps out there. They're just not the sophisticated kind necessarily.
Right. Or Google Hangouts like this one where you actually hang out with your customers and deal with their feedback and issues in real time.
Maps, navigation, all those things are killer apps.
But they lack a little bit of that back-end integration piece that makes you think enterprise.
Yeah, I think what I would argue is that if we're looking at the minute, I think we're going to be going through a renewal of enterprise systems, right? A renewal of a lot of those things. And I think if as you integrate, and back to Kevin's point, in memory and social and analytics and mobile into enterprise apps that have their own back end and they have their own analytics and their own front end, extending those to mobile is quite logical. Or I wouldn't say it's logical. I would say that mobile is purely a component of the overall solution. It's not even relevant as a line of business on its own. And so I think that's what we'll see is solutions that have a mobile dimension coming to the enterprise as a packaged solution rather than bolt-ons to existing enterprise apps. I think that's where we'll see the prevalence.
So just to make sure I understand, you're basically saying that what's needed is a rethink of enterprise applications using these new sort of approaches and ways of delivery. And if you do that, then mobile's going to be an integral part of that.
And it is already. If you look at Salesforce,
right.
I mean, that's an integral part of even Salesforce. And Salesforce is old tech, really. Anything that comes after that is going to have a mobile component. It's just implicit.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at, I just think that mobile is probably, if you combine again the smack talk there, John, the social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, this is a disruption that is equivalent or bigger than internet itself. And I think companies are taking a pause and saying, okay, what does this really mean? What are we going to put in the cloud? How are we going to secure anything that's in the cloud, not just mobility, but anything in the cloud? How do we secure that? And, all of a sudden there's big data on everything. So, and we want to do real-time analytics. Okay, so that's, again, security and mobility. What it's doing is, I think it's forcing companies not only to be able to look at mobility as a little innovation step, but this is massive. Suddenly they're saying, hold on, we're going to have to look at not just mobility, we have to look at a whole list of things here, because this is, in many cases, is transforming businesses. I recently just met with about half of New Zealand's largest banks all in one road trip. And in every case, the banks were saying, how do we respond to a mobile-only bank that doesn't even have a physical branch? They're popping up. They can do transactions. You can do deposits. You can do all these things here, which is impacting us, which own skyscrapers and branches everywhere and have massive assets that are locked down. And these guys are popping up cool little apps left and right. There are many industries that we're seeing that.
Indeed. Okay, well, this is John Reed with John ERP. I'm joined by Kevin Benedict, international mobile man of mystery, and the ubiquitous John Appleby. And we've just been covering a whole bunch of mobile issues, but now I want to see if we can get into even more trouble and dig into SAP's mobile strategy a little bit. So guys, for this portion of the conversation, let's start off. Just tell me what you think are the strengths and weaknesses of SAP's enterprise mobile approach.
John, you first.
Who wants the baton?
Is this a dagger I see before me? No.
Yeah, just don't fall on it yourself, okay?
I think probably the biggest strength is that, from what I've seen, they've realized that there is a massive challenge in getting the enterprise out to these devices. And I was going to touch on it in the last piece of the conversation, but I'll touch on it now and then segue back into the next piece. So the first piece is that HTML5 apps have been crap, but that technology is changing. Native apps are great, but they're far too costly to implement for a typical productivity app within an enterprise. So if you're talking about deep integration with the people doing your service, and that is their main device, you can afford it. If you're in oil and gas, if you're in utilities, but if you're putting it out to your average worker, there is no ROI for building native apps. They're too expensive. The timing this year, next year, probably about right, is going to be right. The HTML5 provides good quality user experience. And that is the timing for enterprise apps, because you can build them cheaply. I've got one on my phone right here that doesn't work, but if it did work, then it would do more than just give me a login screen. And I'm led to believe this was a few weeks development on our CRM system, and it gives access to leads, opportunities. It's HTML5. It uses SAP's gateway technology to integrate back in. It was easy to do. It allows basic updates, and it gives the sales people an ability to get. Now, we previously implemented SAP's native mobile CRM app software, but it required 3 different levels of middleware. It required access gateways and customization to apps and a ton of cost. This is really simple. The licensing's simple, the design's simple. Previously, it didn't work. Now, SAP's got all the components to get that right for when HTML5 becomes mature enough upon the devices that are prevalent to make that work. So I think they're in the right place to get it right, 2013, 2014. I think, the thing they've struggled with is execution thus far, but I think everyone else has struggled too.
I would have to second everything that you said there, John. Ultimately, I see everything is going to end up in the cloud, and it's going to be HTML5 for the enterprise. I'm generalizing, of course, because there's always a role for native as well. But as I pointed out earlier, the platform players have not been able to find that answer to getting economy of scale and profitability in a sustainable manner. They're still looking for, how do I get enough people to use a platform at any one time? And the ultimate answer, I think, is going to be a cloud-based platform with HTML apps, and the value is going to be pushed back again to the content, where content is always king.
I can think of a couple other strengths to SAP's approach I would add. One is that I'm not sure if I've ever seen the level of engagement inside of SAP. SAP claims that it listens, but a lot of times if it listens, it doesn't actually act. In the mobile arena under Sanjay's organization, I've seen these guys listen and respond to a lot of stuff and serious issues, including licensing and pricing, especially around Gateway, which was a real barrier to adoption that they've shifted. Developer engagement and mobile licenses, which used to be a huge pain and is now free to get started anyway, or at least affordable through Amazon Cloud or whatever. So a lot of that has come through engagement with stakeholders, partners, mentors, dissatisfied community people that are too often ignored. I've been pretty impressed with how SAP has handled that, and I think that's allowed them to turn some of their weaknesses into strengths, and it's almost too bad that the rest of the organization hasn't followed suit as much with that, because there's a lot there. The other thing I think is strong is the cloud-based development platform, formerly known as NetWeaver Cloud, I think now HANA Cloud, if I got the press release correct, has incorporated mobile functionality and development capabilities within it. And to me, that leads, John, to where you and Kevin with your mobile smack talk have been talking about, which is how these trends come together. And the more you can build applications that incorporate these capabilities, I think that's really cool. To me, I'm not sure I come up with one weakness. I mean, I think the biggest thing is it's just structurally still very challenging with mobile on a variety of fronts. I'm not sure a lot of that is on SAP necessarily, but I do think SAP is still running into competitors who are smarter about including mobile functionality for free in core areas where SAP has still been trying to monetize. Jarrett Pazahanik has been carrying that torch on the HR HCM side for a while.
The torch got inserted some while back into Jarrett. He didn't win that one. But I wanted to pick up on a couple of points you made, John, because I think there were a couple of good points. Yeah. I mean, the first one is Sanjay, and there are a few things we can't talk about here, and the reason for that is that I was walking through Las Vegas one morning, and Sanjay caught me, and he said, "John, want to get people to talk to us about the mobile thing," and he organized a session for some feedback, and he got the feedback. quite loud, and we'll see whether he's done something about that. But the listening is half of the doing, right? And I think that's true. I think the second thing, though, I tread carefully, but SAP has a lot of mobile legacy. They have several platforms. They have complexity.
Right.
Now, they've listened on the development side, at least in many ways, and getting into that ecosystem is easier. And they've listened on the pricing side, and buying it is 100 times easier than it was. But I think there are two elements that they've got to get right. And one is your Jarrett, and I'm not going to try and pronounce Pazahanik because I can't. And that's the one dimension to it, which is you've got to give away the platform, give away the damn platform, get it out to people, charge. Give away the apps as well. Give away the freemium apps so that people get a taste of it. Give them something. Let them drink from the cup, from the iPhone cup first of all, and then charge them when they're getting value. You know, give them an expenses app that doesn't have a camera on it. You know, that allows them to do manual expenses. Give them Expensify, make it better. And the other side is recognize that you have Cyclo, which is a great platform for the blue collar market, because its TCO is low for field devices, but it recognizes that the quality of experience of that leaves something to be desired, and that's okay. But recognize that here it's all about HTML5, and the apps that we built here, for example, they're not based on SAP technologies of ERP, CRM, and gateway. But what they're not based on is any platform technology that provides any of that other stuff. And actually, they're based on that company that I couldn't remember, which is called Aperion, for provisioning. But there isn't an SAP technology that makes it easy and cost-effective to develop those kinds of apps, and that's what SAP has to get right.
Well, see, it's the business model, which is where there's so much challenge, and it's just not SAP. It's everybody that comes out of that history of selling licenses. And suddenly there's low-cost apps. There's innovation happening at lightning fast speeds all around them. How is a company like SAP to respond? You know, I actually thought it was really, really cool what they did last year, where they stepped back and said, you know what, we're going to support partnerships with Cincha and PhoneGap and Appcelerator and all these different guys that are building really cool stuff that allow you to be nimble and agile and create the latest, greatest in these environments, and will support those from an integration perspective. Because I think that's what it has to be, because they're coming from an age where they were looking for a life cycle where their platforms would last, 7 years before they have to be upgraded. And you can't have that. It's just a whole different world in mobility. And people will eat their lunch if they tried to lock it down and say you're going to be on a 7-year cycle with mobility. No, they have to free that up. And I think they've done a good job there. The other thing that I was pondering this the other day, because when I was at Mobile World Congress, I interviewed just a lot of folks at SAP, and I was impressed by the level of skill and knowledge. I remember back in 2010, SAP really didn't know what they had. They didn't know where the gaps were. They didn't know how to make things work, anything. But, I looked 3 years forward. They've got really smart people. It doesn't mean everything works great. It doesn't mean that they're not struggling to keep up with innovation and all this. It means they've got smart people that can see that and are trying their best to work within the limitations of a giant company like SAP that has, the quarterly income requirements that are demanded of them.
Right. And what you find is that, again, so many times when you analyze SAP, their biggest enemy or danger is actually themselves. And I think this applies as well, in the sense that so often with SAP, there's monetization that seems to need to happen all along the way, and that just doesn't work for mobile. It can't be a toll road where every two miles down the road, passing data along, someone inside of SAP has to show they've monetized. And I've had conversations with folks inside of SAP about this, because they're like, how can we monetize this? And I'm like, you don't. You give it away, because that's how you're going to win. And so to me, that's what I really want to see. And I think we've seen some signs of that, but I think that culture business model change that you just hit on is really, really.
I think there's another dimension to that which we've not touched on in the consumerization of mobile, is in the consumer mobile area, which is I read that as of now, in-app purchases have a greater revenue share of the mobile market than apps do. That tells you everything you need to know about how people are buying apps. They're not buying apps. They're buying what's in the app when they've got value. Evernote's free, and then you pay. It's not cheap. It's $3.99 a month. People aren't buying $3.99 for the app. They're paying $3.99 for a month once they've got the free app. And you know what? They'll do the same with SAP.
Right.
Yep.
In-app purchases of premium functionality.
The other thing I think is brilliant on SAP's part is this kind of evolution of how they're selling their products, where they're kind of grabbing all their individual products and pushing them under one name. because then when you do a licensing deal at the, annual licensing agreement with SAP, you're buying just one name, but you're getting a huge number of different tools and platforms and stuff underneath. You don't even know what you have, but it also makes it very hard to try to compare and contrast with the competitor.
Well, Kevin, I must say you sound more upbeat about SAP's mobility execution than you did last time we talked. So maybe SAP can put that in the win column as well.
Going back to what Mr. Appleby has said there, it's hard. Enterprise mobility is hard, and try to do that for hundreds of thousands of customers and meet their requirements. I just see a lot of progress, and I see a lot of smart people working on a lot of hard things. Doesn't mean it's easy. But it's not just it used to be we would look at this in the context of, are they being smart on mobile? Well, it's not about mobile. Mobile's like one part of it. It's about all those other things we're talking about. Mm-hmm. The role of cloud, the role of security, the role of social, all that piled in. So it's a much bigger problem. And I think I have a greater appreciation for the magnitude of challenge than I used to.
Mm. Kevin, I know you track a lot of vendors in the mobile space. If you worked at SAP and your butt was on the line for this stuff, which vendors would be keeping you up at night? Which ones would you be tracking closely? Would it be large enterprise vendors? Would it be small up and coming? Would it be vendors you might want to partner with or acquire? What do you think SAP should be keeping an eye on right now?
And it goes back to, I don't even think the competition is going to come from mobility vendors. It's going to come from cloud vendors of platforms that compete at the ERP level. It's going to be the social platforms. It's going to be the HR platforms and human capital management platforms and scheduling and workforce management platforms. It's going to come from all of those, which are going to have their own mobile solutions attached to them. And I see that as being a bigger challenge for SAP than any particular mobile player, because SAP can be smart enough to just back off and say, look, we're going to own the integration layer. We're going to own perhaps the APIs and some of that stuff. And we're going to let other smaller players do the app development area. And I see they're already doing that, which means they're already backing off from the area that was going to be the hardest for them. And they're just doing the areas that are going to be core competencies for them. I already see that happening. Their challenges are going to come from other cloud-based solutions that are going to that are going to offer better pricing models. They're going to offer more agile environments and the ability to just turn on a dime. And that's going to be where the big challenges are going to be for SAP, not from mobility vendors themselves.
More smack alert from Kevin. Absolutely. John, any final comments on that before we turn to our wrap?
I don't think so. I think SAP is clear on where its challenges are, and they're probably clearer on how to get through them than ever before. And I think what they suffered from in the past was the courage to do what's right in the long term. And I hope we're going to see movement in that. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's a good stopping point. So guys, for our wrap, just give me something quick. I know you're both probably going to be in Orlando. John, I guess you're trying to resolve a couple of logistical issues, but assuming you do and you're there, Kevin, I know you're going to be there. Give me like the 30-second version of what you're looking. Any questions you want to get answered there? Anything you think people should be keeping an eye on with mobile Sapphire?
Yeah, I meet with a lot of CIOs doing mobile strategy seminars. The question that comes up more and more today is, what role does collaboration have? And how does that fit in with mobile? So you're creating a mobile app, how do we incorporate social business functionality within those mobile apps? And that's really the question I'm asking all kinds of people at SAP. When I just did these interviews at Mobile World Congress, again, I'm saying, so how are you, in fact, incorporating social into there? I look at the Google suite. Everything they do, from Google Sheets to Google Docs to Keep to Google Drive to Chrome, They all have a button where you can open up a Hangout and talk about a document, talk about a spreadsheet, talk about anything. They're making everything social. So I'm really seeing Google as a leader there, and I'm really looking to see how SAP incorporates more social into all the things that they actually do into their solutions. In addition, I really want to see how they're going to mobilize Ariba. I mean, Ariba is massive and is used for spend management by hundreds of thousands of companies. Where's the mobile apps that really help real-time data come out of there? I haven't seen any. Ariba's a big deal. I see them waving like 2013, Ariba is one of those pillars they're going to be talking about all this year. So talk to me about mobile and social around Ariba. I want to hear it.
I think for me it's simple. Give us a roadmap, give us a vision, explain how to get there. That's simple. Nothing much.
Okay, cool. I'll just add for my nickel here at the end that machine to machine stuff. I expect we'll see some cool stuff. Kevin, you talked about both the smart cities example and the smart vending machines, but SAP actually surprised me at Mobile World Congress with how advanced some of their thinking was around machine to machine communications. It just plays to their strengths, both in terms of HANA and in terms of some of the Sybase assets around event processing. And so I would encourage folks to keep an eye out for SAP there, because I think they're going to push aggressively. And I expect to see a few other mobile announcements, product and otherwise. So I think mobile will be a significant theme of the May event. Not as much as Business Suite on HANA, maybe, but if HANA's the steak, then mobile's going to be the mashed potatoes, in my opinion. So, and I'm not sure cloud is not going to be served. I'm not sure if it will or not. Maybe it will be as like
as a dish served cold. I think the cloud is going to be the HP source.
Yeah.
You're just being mean, Mr. Reed, because John's hungry.
Hey, listen.
Yeah.
Steak and fries is nothing without HP source.
And HP being the de facto cloud leader, I think that's a good vendor to choose, John. Well done. Well played. Guys, I think we need to wrap for food break. We desperately need it. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks.
See you soon. Later.